Namaste. As per our Gurukul tradition, first, let's fold our hands together and recite the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, thou art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. Lead us not unto temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Namaste. I am really pleased to offer a very warm welcome to our today's chief guest and expert, Dr. Mihir Dave, our respected principal, Dr. Nagar sir, who is not present here, but his blessings and best wishes are always with us, our respected teachers, and my dear friends in our Sri Dhirendra Bhai Mehta Postgraduate Center of English. As you all know, today we are going to have a wonderful guidance session on NET and SLET examination. To become a professor, these examinations are very much crucial. So today we have a very good expert, Dr. Mihir Bhai Dave, with us. So first, I would like to give a brief introduction of our expert. So Dr. Mihir Dave teaches English, Communication and French in Marwari University, Rajkot. He specializes in translation studies and Indian mythology. Looking at the process of learning very closely, he engages himself with alternative learning spaces and communities. More than 10 years of teaching experience at UG, PG and PhD scholars levels at various institutions of Gujarat. He published 9 research papers in peer-reviewed national and international journals. He published a book entitled Strategies for Translating Dialectal Features, a study of selected Gujarati novel in English. An English translation. So now you know that how we all are fortunate to have a guide like Mihir sir. So let's start our session with the report of our previous study circle. I will request Ms. Rajal Piprotar for the report of the previous study circle. Ms. Rajal Piprotar.
Namaste to all of you. I, Rajal Piprotar, here to give a report of previous study circle. Our previous study circle was held on 16th of July. Uh, that was a discussion on Rajratna Sreshti Shri Nanjibhai Kalidas Mehta, a journey from Nanjibhai to Rajratna Sreshti Shri. It was great opportunity to know about our founder father Shri Nanjibhai Kalidas Mehta. We began the session with the Lord's Prayer, which enchanted by all the students. Then Miss Aditi Dave and Miss Parul Shukla gave speech on Shreshti Shri Nanjibhai Kalidas Mehta. Vote of thanks given by Rajal Piprotar. Such an awesome study circle. Thank you all of you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rajal Piprotar. Now it's a time to have an expert speech. So I would like to invite Dr. Mihir Dave sir for the speech. Please, sir.
Okay, good afternoon, students. I hope I'm audible to all of you. Uh, is my voice clear to all? Fine, great.
Yes.
Now I'll share a PPT and would like to give you brief information about what this NetSLET is all about, what, why, and how. I'll try to be as brief as possible because I think it will be more meaningful to discuss your questions and concerns rather than my giving you a quote-unquote lecture. So what I will do is I'll very briefly share with you some of the points, the PPT that I wanted to share, which I think would give you some insight into say three things, as you can see. I hope you are able to see the screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so as you can see from the title, what I'm going to try is to discuss what, why, and how of NET and GSET exam as the part of your study circle. So, without wasting much of our time, I would first of all like to thank Dr. Anupam Nagar, the management of Gurukul Adikanya College for this opportunity, and I hope that this discussion that we're going to have would be of some help to you. Okay, so first thing first, what do we mean by NET? I think some of you already know. In case you don't, let me give you what it is. So all of you know there are two versions of this test, which is one is national level, and that's what it stands for, National Eligibility Test, and the other one is called GSET, which stands for Gujarat State Eligibility Test. So these are the full form. What it does, it qualifies you for becoming a lecturer, and there are other opportunities also that will open up once you clear say NET or GSET. Right? How are they different? What are the things that it offers? We'll see. But what it covers, right? What it covers is the syllabus, which is very demanding because it talks of these four things you can see, which is history of English literature, which is mainly of the UK, that is United Kingdom, England, and it also includes history of literary say studies, criticism, and theories, right? And as you know that it starts somewhere by 14th century or even before up to the present day. So you can see it is roughly 700 years plus period where you have to know things. Additionally, you also may expect American literature, Canadian literature, African literature, because in all these places also English is used as the first language or at least second language, and a sizable number of say literary production has taken place in America, say Canada, Africa, and many other parts of Commonwealth. In case you know this term, Commonwealth, where countries were once colonized by the British. Right now they are independent, like India, but they are having still having a great influence of English language and literature. So that also would take place. And being Indian students, last point, which is Indian literature in English, right? There are varieties of Indian literature in regional languages, but there is a sizable number of say body of work, especially after say 1850s, where English became a dominant language and English people became dominant in Indian subcontinent, and that's why English literature has brief history in India, somewhere of 100 to 200 years, starting from 1850 up to the present day. So this is the body of work that would be there. So that means any question can be asked from this 700 plus years. At the same time, it will be, as you can see, it will be any work written in America, any work written in Canada, any work written in some part of Africa or even in India would be your syllabus. So it is very demanding, right? So that's what you should know. One thing I should share with you, and you should know that this is not a substitute to your PhD. In case you are planning to become a lecturer in a college, you need to have a PhD. Yes, NET and GSET would qualify you to become a professor, but sooner or later you are expected to complete your PhD. So that you should know that NET and GSET are qualifying exam. What it also qualifies you, I'll share in the next slide, but you should know this, that this is what NET and GSET are. There is a difference of national level and state level. How are they different? We'll try and see in the next slide. So for example, why, if you see, then you'll be able to understand what it does when you clear NET or GSET. Well, first of all, if you clear, it will qualify you for the recruitment. Understand, it will qualify you, right? It doesn't make you a professor, right, or a lecturer. It will qualify you to be for the recruitment in the UG level, that is undergraduate level, in say college across nation. If you clear NET, that means you are qualified across India. If you clear GSET, that means you are qualified across the state. Okay, so that's what it does. Once you clear, so what will happen? You will be qualified. So that's one. Second, you will also be qualified for something called JRF. I don't know how many of you know JRF. That stands for Junior Research Fellowship. That means in UGC recognized research works, if they are going on, like major research work, minor research work, where the funding would be done by, say, UGC. Such research work would be huge body of research. There, they'll need some, say assistance, some people who could help. Say, for example, finding the books. Say, for example, finding the quotations, citations, etc., which is not a clerical work. It is research work. So if there is a huge body of research, in that you can become a research fellow, and it will be a paid, say, research. That means if you are a junior research fellow, that means you will join this and you will get very handsome amount of, say, stipend, which will help you to earn at the same time learning. So, and in future, let's say when you are planning to become a PhD graduate, this research work that you will assist will be of a great help. But to become a JRF, that is Junior Research Fellow, you need to clear NET or GSET. And again, it will be applicable that if you clear NET, that means you can become JRF across India. And if you clear GSET, that means you can become a JRF across the state, that is Gujarat. Uh, Third and the last thing is there is something called PET, which is PhD entrance test. Right now, you know that if you want to become a PhD, join as a PhD somewhere in any university across India, they undertake the test, entrance test, which is known as PET, generally known as PET, which stands for PhD entrance test. But if you have cleared NET or GSET, that means you don't have to clear this exam, right? Will be exempted. That means you directly can face the Viva of PhD. If you clear it, of course, you will be registered in PhD. But for others, those who are not clear yet, as let's say NET or GSET, for example, when I enrolled for my PhD, I was not having NET or SET clear, so I had to appear for PET, which I cleared, and only then I could do my PhD. Right. So these three things will happen if you clear NET or GSET. Right. As you know that NET stands for national level. So that means you will be qualified for national level for GRF recruitment and PET. If you clear GSET, that means you will be qualified only limited to Gujarat. Outside Gujarat, GSET will not work. Right. Let's say you want to apply for some Rajasthan university, then your GSET will not help. Right. Same way, if some student from Rajasthan has cleared, say, RSET, Rajasthan State Eligibility Test, he or she will not be qualified in Gujarat. But if you have cleared NET, that means across India, you are qualified to appear for recruitment, appear for JRF, and appear for PET exemption. Okay, so this is what it will do. Are we clear with this part? What and why part of it? I'll keep the questions for a while. So let me first finish this part. So then comes what and why we have discussed. So now I'll try and come to the main point, which is how do I prepare? Now, before I start, I just wanted to know that how many of you
Excuse
have. Yes, yes,
Sorry to interrupt you, but
yes.
please put your microphone closer to you.
Okay, okay. Is it better now?
Yes, sir. Now it's better. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
okay. I hope the previous points I discussed have reached you.
Yes, sir.
Basically, I discussed what and why part of it. What is NET and what is GSET? What will happen when you clear GSET and what will happen when you clear, uh, say, NET? That we have discussed. Now I'll come to the main point, which is to talk about how do we prepare for this NET or GSET. Okay. Now, just wanted to know, like, how many of you have appeared or applied for GSET in December 2021?
No, sir.
You have not applied for it?
No, sir.
Like none of the students from PG?
No.
Okay, how many of you are in MA Part 2?
Actually, sir, we all are in MA Part 2.
Okay, technically, all of you are qualified to apply for GSET. In case you don't know, now it's your call. You have to decide whether you want to apply for it or not. But yesterday was the last date for applying for GSET. Luckily, the government has extended the date. So the extended date now is 31st of July. In case you want to apply, you still have a chance. You don't have to go anywhere. You can do it online. You just have to pay whatever fees. I think 900 for open category, I don't know the others, but it is somewhere around 900 that you have to apply. Once you do that, your hall ticket would be there. You just need to select your code, which is language code. In our case, it will be English, and you can select the nearby exam center, right? And you can appear. You would say, but sir, we are not PG clear. Well, part 2 students can appear for this, which will be conditional, say, a thing that once you clear the net, for example, you cleared your net and your MA result has not come. Once your MA result would come, then you have to apply that, okay, I have cleared my part 2. Now, please issue. Because there is some condition that if you are not having marks more than 55 percentage, I think in open category. In other category, there is some relaxation given. But I know that in open category, if you score 55% in aggregated part 1 and 2, only then you can appear for NET or GSET. But in your case, because your part 2 is pending, you can still appear, but condition would be that even if you clear, let's say NET or GSET, but if you are not qualified, then your NET or GSET will not be valid. Okay, so that means all of you are having a chance to appear for this. You can apply for this in case you want. It's absolutely your call. You need to take a decision. But I would suggest that you should. I would strongly suggest you should, because you are already a student. You must be studying literature, language, history, everything in your MA, and you must have studied in your graduation also. So everything would be on your fingertips. So many details would be already there with you in your live memory, and then ultimately you can appear. So still, it's your call. You have to take a call whether you want to go for it. So now, how do you prepare for this? So I'll just give you brief some suggestions which I tried. Some of my friends did, and they cleared net and SLED. So let's see. Let's see. First of all, understand that we are talking about English literature. So if you want to talk about English literature, you need to know the history of the British Empire, right? Which started somewhere by 10th century onwards. Up to 10th century, there was no English, there was no England. Geography was there, but geographically it was not called England. It was groups were there, Bhutons were there, island was there, but it was not called England, right? And there was no language called English. There were roots, there were people who were using tribal language, there were Anglo-Saxons, but there was no English. It started developing by 10th century, and up to the 14th century, by the time you have this Geoffrey Chaucer, that English started becoming a language. Till then, it was not even a language. So that's the first half where we could see this empire started recognizing itself, and then there was a rise, something called golden period. You must have studied something called Shakespearean age or golden age or Elizabethan age. That was somewhere in 15th century. The 15th to 16th century was like rise of the British Empire, which became predominant in entire Europe, right? So up to 16th century, it was not so. The French were more dominating. But then after this 15th and 16th century, you could see the British Empire became, say, more and more powerful. And then after 16th century, the empire started expanding itself. That means they go beyond the Britain. They went to America. They came to all the way to India, and you know that the history part of it. So wherever the British went, they go with the church, they go with the language, and of course they go with the English literature, right? So there you also need to know brief history of the British Empire, which starts from 10th century, and from 17th century onwards, you could see its expansion. Then we also need to know the literature, because see, the literature would be connected with the British Empire. British Empire is the one that produced English literature, at least the first 400 years. Then there were others who also contributed to English literature, but initially it was only the British. So as we discussed, it was from 14th century onwards that English started becoming a language. If you have studied Geoffrey Chaucer, Canterbury Tales, you see that though it is English, it does not look like English, right? In modern day English, you can't even read Geoffrey Chaucer without a dictionary or without the glossary, because it was old English and it was much different. But then still, English started, say, being available from 14th century onwards. And then, of course, golden period was by Shakespeare's, that is 15th century, Elizabethan age, and Restoration age, that way. So you could see that how do you remember 700 years of history? It's very demanding, isn't it? But you can, and you don't need to do it. It's already available in history books, a history of English literature, that all the periods are divided into ages. Say, for example, Romantic age, the Restoration age, Shakespearean age. Then it will be easy for you to remember that who were the authors in the Romantic age, or what kinds of works were there in the Restoration age, right? So that way, if you group the history in the ages, it will be much easier for you to remember and understand. This entire NET and GSET exam is basically dealing with your memory. It is going to test your memory. That do you remember the author of this work, or do you remember the year of publication? Do you remember this character? Do you remember? Hello, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, yeah. So this is what would help you to memorize things. If you want to memorize, you need to do it this way, so that you know that, okay, box number one, box number two. There is something called chronology, which was the first say time where from where the history starts in English literature. We would say, okay, 10th century, or let's say 14th century. So from 14th century onwards, who were the authors? Apart from Chaucer, there were other authors also. Who were they? What were they writing? What were their works? What were the kinds of works, like novels or drama or poetry, right? So those things you need to know, and you can also add more details. Now, there is one more bifurcation that you can think of. Now, you could see that two bifurcation is, one is the history part, pure history, not literature history, but history of the Britain, history of the great British Empire, right? And the second one is, which is called literature history. So there are two parallel history that you need to see. I'll also add one more dimension, which is how to memorize these histories. It will be good if you consider them as stories, right? If you watch a movie, you usually remember what happened to these characters and things, right? Who was the first one? Who was this? What's the relation? What happened? So all those things would be easier if you consider it as a story, right? So there are three parts of stories that you need to know and you need to remember. One is political story, or it's called history. The word history has come from his story. Now, who is he? He is obviously the king or maybe the queen, usually the kings. So they are writing their story, and that's history. So that way it is more subjective a history, not objective like in India. An Indian term for history is itihas. It's a beautiful term because itihas is literally this is how it happened. Thus it happened. Itihas. Has is something that happened. Iti is thus. So this is how it happened. That's the better term. But for them, it is always the story, and that is the one who won. There are no histories of the kings, those who lost. Those who were the winners, their stories were written in the history, at least in the European context. So that political stories of kings and queens, who were the successors and who were the predecessors, that you need to know, right? So who was the king? Let's say Queen Elizabeth, and then the daughter and the son, and that line of a political story that you need to do, because it has great influence on the society. Because change of the king would change the society in a great way. So that you need to know. So history, you could see that kings and queens. So now the societies used to be of three folds, at least in Europe. One was the king and queen centric society. That means king would say it is day, all the people and the subject also will have to say it's day. If they say no, it's not day, it's night, then also they have to accept that yes, because king is always right. So that was the kinds of societies in the ancient times, where the king was the center or the queen was the center. Whatever king or queen would say would be the ultimate truth. Then religion came in picture, right? Especially after the 5th and 6th century, that the church or the religion came in the center. In fact, there were governments that were run by the church and the religion. They are known as theocracy. I guess you know these words. There are kinds of governments. One that is run by the king or the monarch is called monarchy. The monarchy is where the king is in the center. Then comes theocracy or theocracy. So theocracy is one where the religion is in the center, right? And then the most popular version of the government is known as democracy, where the demograph or the common people are in the center. It's their will, and that is came into existence after Renaissance, somewhere in the 14th century in Europe. and 15th and 16th century in England, where the humans were in the center. It was for the first time in after Renaissance that humans were kept in center. That it should be humans the first, and rest of the things. If you are not there as humans, there is no use of church, and there is no point of having kings or queens. So that realization came somewhere in, I say, 14th and 15th century onwards. So that's you need to know. And then the first two aspects, the political history and social history, will get reflected in literature. You must have heard the quotation which says that literature mirrors the society. What is literature? It is nothing but the mirror to the society. If the society is good, you will find it reflected in the literature. If society is bad, you will find it getting reflected in literature. So literature is not exclusive. Literature is not in isolation. It is always having some influence or having some influence of say society and of politics, right? So if you bifurcate these three layers of history, that okay, what was the political history, who was the king, who was the next queen, who was the next to next queen and king, that will be the one line that you have to keep. Second line, what was the kind of society, what are the changes that were taking place. Say for example, restoration age. Have you studied restoration age? I don't know, PG or UG, age
Yes,
of,
sir.
yeah. So what do you mean by restoration? What was restored?
Uh, King was restored, and there was Oliver Cromwell.
Yes, who dethroned the Charles the First, right? And then the Charles the Second was restored. So it was not
Yes,
only
sir.
monarchy that was restored; it was also the drama, the theaters, for example. In the Puritan regime, the theaters were closed. So with the change of the king, even the theaters also were opened up. Even the literature started, especially the fun kind of literature started happening. But then before that, there was a Puritan age in Oliver Cromwell's time, where you could see the great works written like Paradise Lost by John Milton, which is highly, say, spiritual and religious work that developed in the Puritan regime. And then later on, when it became, say, restoration, then you find the restoration comedies, right? If you must have noticed the kinds of comedies we see, which is having center as fun. No didactic, no, say, religion in picture, no morals, just fun, right? Something which is was a reaction, because for 12 years theaters and fun literature was banned from England, and that's why there was a reaction along with the Charles. By the way, the Charles II grew up in France, and when he came back to the England, he came with the French influence, and that's why you could see the great influence of French tragedies in Restoration tragedies. So that also you need to study, that why and how French influence came to England, right? It is because of this political and otherwise reasons. So you could see these three aspects of your history could be interconnected, and can be easier for you to memorize when you say that why there is an influence of French literature or French drama in particular on restoration comedy, and then you'll get the connection that it is because the Charles II, who was growing up in France, and when he came back to England, of course he came with the French influence. That can be seen reflected in the society as well as in the literature. So these two things you could see in connection. So similarly, you will see whatever happens never happens in isolation, in society, in politics, and of course in literature. So there is always a reaction of, say, politics to society and society to literature, isn't it? So that's the connection. There are other aspects of literature which very briefly I just want to show you, which you can observe and it will be easier for you to remember. Say for example, we already discussed that politics would have a great influence on society. Similarly, society would have its influence in literature, and then literature would affect the criticism. Now, what is criticism? Criticism is the way you study literature, isn't it? So, if there is no literature, there is no criticism, right? If there is no agitation or some kind of chaos in the society, there is no literature. If there is no political change, there is no chaos. You see that? So all these four aspects, politics or history, affecting the society, society affecting the literature, and literature causing the criticism. So these four are, you can see, interconnected or interdependent. They are depending on each other or one another, right? So these four things are there. Then what do you mean by literature? So of course we can take separate lectures on it, but for your understanding, there is always a debate on the purpose of literature. That why do we write, say, a poem, or why do we write a story? So there are debates going on, still going on. That is it the purpose of literature to teach you, or is it to preach you, or is it to just to please or to entertain you? What's the purpose, right? Or is it art for art's sake, or is it art for life's sake? Literature should teach you something, or literature should just entertain you. That's the debate which is going on, and you will find many say critics and other things related to this, right? So when you are studying the history, these things I'm sure would help you. Then comes the other part of it, which is how literature, which is the role of criticism. If you look at these three layers of say critics, starting from Plato, Aristotle, Horace, and Longinus, what were they doing? They were not, by the way, writers or poets. They were just philosophers. And they were telling you, along with so many things, they were telling you how to write literature, or which is the best literature and which is not so good literature. Right? You must have studied Plato's Republic and Aristotle's theory of tragedy and all. But he himself is not a dramatist. He is telling you what are the ways in which a drama or a tragedy should be written. Right? So Longinus will tell you how to make poetry sublime, but he himself was not a poet. Right? So that was the first the layer of critics, those who were telling you how to do or how to write literature, right? And then came the practitioners such as Dante, Sidney, Dryden, Wordsworth. There are many such examples, but these are a few I am taking, who were themselves very good author, right? For example, Wordsworth is a wonderful critic, but a better author. Dryden is a wonderful, say, author, but a better critic, right? So Sir Philip Sidney, say Dante, all these were author as well as critics. So that means they are practitioners as well as they are telling you how to do that. That was a shift that you could see from Sir Philip Sidney and say Dryden onwards. And last, the tricky part for you, for exam point of view also, and from understanding point of view also, with the last layer of the critics such as Matthew Arnold, and T.S. Eliot, Derrida, and these kinds. You will not be able to understand T.S. Eliot and Derrida for sure if you are not aware of the history of English literature and English criticism, right? So for you to reach to 20th century, like T.S. Eliot belongs to 20th century, Derrida belongs also to 20th century, you will not get head or tail of it until you complete your say study of history, because that's connected, right? If you don't know the history, why it is so, then you will not be able to understand the present time. So that way, if you want to say understand the history, you need to know this, and it will be easier for you to remember anything if you understand it, isn't it? So that's what you should think of in terms of drawing maybe charts, maybe preparing say notes, but you should have these lines in your head of say actual history or a political history, social history, and of course then literary history as well as history of criticism. So those lines, if you can draw, it will be easier for you to remember. So that's that. Now, before I open for the question answer, I'll just share with you some of the resources. Like how do you prepare? From where do you get the material? Now, when I was studying, the material was not so easily available, but now thanks to technology, it's available. You may still depend on the books, which is published books. So you could think of these, say, authors, those who prepared history of English literature. So you can note down these names. They are like David Dashish, Legby, and Kazamia. So these were the historians, those who wrote literary history. Then these are the slightly older ones, David Dashish and Legby. Then came Joseph Alexander or W.J. Say Long. So these were slightly more advanced in terms of their write-up. And of course, the last one, which I would strongly recommend in terms of newer ones. See, up to 20th century, David Dashish and Legby and Kazamia, they are good. But for the modern critics like Derrida and others, you need the latest one. So there, Andrew Saunders, in case you know, the author of Literary History, published by Oxford University. right? So that Oxford version is latest, like last version came before 5 years. So that means latest. And then of course Routledge also published history of uh, the English literature, which is also very advanced. That means the latest one, because this W.H. Long, Legby and Kazamia, they stopped writing after 1950 because they themselves wrote. When they published it, it was the most advanced one. But now, last 100 years history you will not find in David Dashish, because David Dashish stopped writing after 1950s. So Derrida came after 1950s. So you will not find Derrida and David Dashish, right? So these are the published books. I'm sure if you got good library, I think Gurukul has good library. So you may find at least one or two history books here. So you can pick and choose either of it. Then you may also think of some online resources. So these online resources are uh, there which you can also use. For example, if I'll tell you why am I giving you two options. One is if you are a sincere reader, which you are. Let's say there are two kinds of students. Those who learn by reading, those who are visuals. They read and they understand. Or there are others, those who are auditory learners. Auditory means those who learn better by listening. So if you are an auditory kind, which I'm an auditory kind. I'm not very good in reading. That means reading does not appeal me so much as listening would. So for the listeners, you may go for YouTube, and there are wonderful lectures available. Uh, there are series of lectures, but one I would strongly recommend is called NPTL. Uh, Anybody knows or no? I don't know, but NPTL is a wonderful platform created by IITs. All of you know these IITs. Across the campus you have these IITs. On these IITs they also have humanities, Department of Humanities, and this Department of Humanities would run these courses. And by the way, these courses are available online free of cost. In case some of you are interested, you can join that. But for NET and GSET, what you can do is you can look at you can search on YouTube NPTEL lecture, or you can simply type history of English literature by NPTEL. So you'll find wonderful lecturers giving lectures, a series of lectures on history, starting from let's say 14th century, 15th century. So those lectures will be there with lecture notes and all. That will also help you to study the history and literature and everything. There are other YouTubers like Arpita Karwa is one I know personally. She is a girl from Rajasthan, and she cleared this say net, I think in 4, 5, 6 years, and then she did not become a professor, but she became a YouTuber. She started her own channel called arpitakarwa.com, where she is offering the tuitions and video and audio resources for NET and GSET aspirant. Now, you may enroll for her course, which is paid, but you need not to enroll if you think you can manage with NPTEL. You can also find many of her videos on YouTube for free of cost. If you are interested, if you find it appealing, you may also register for this course where audio visuals would also be prepared and provided. But I would suggest that free of cost, lot of material and lot of content is already available. So you should not pay for anything extra. Or even the libraries, in case you are a good reader, you don't need to go online. You can simply find the book. Only last suggestion I'll make, and then I'll stop, is that please don't depend on any one source. For example, you take David Dash's 4 volumes of history of literature, is fine, but you should take at least two resources so that you can compare and contrast. For example, one history by David Dashish and one by W.J. Long. So you can make a comparative study. I know it's voluminous. There'll be 4 volumes of David Dashish and uh, I think 300 or 400 plus pages of uh, W.J. Long history. And if you go for Andrew Saunders or Routledge, it is even more than 1,000 pages, which is a demanding task to be done. But you have to do it once in your lifetime. Then you will be not only qualified and good with your NET and GSET, but you'll be actually good with your content. All these things will be on your fingertips, and you'll be able to understand better. And later on, if you become a professor, you'll be able to explain better. So you have to do it once in your life, and these are the sources that you can go for. Right. So I think this is what I wanted to share. That this is how, what, why, and how part of it. Which I think I tried, and I'll stop here. In case you have any query questions, I think it will be better to discuss here.
So very much, sir, for such a fantastic presentation. Now it's a time for question and answers. So you all are allowed questions, please. Yes, anyone want to ask questions? Yes, sir. I
Yes,
want. Okay, yes, Paru.
yes, yes. My question is that, sir, as English is a vast subject, and so we want your suggestion regarding how much time we have to spend or on reading or any timetable we should follow.
Well, it depends. It depends on you particularly. Let's say there could be that some of you are working. I don't know your background. So, for example, what do you do, Parul? Are you only a student or do you teach somewhere? What do you do?
I am a student only.
Okay, great. So that's the best time for you to prepare. So, for example, first of all, you have your exam, MA exam. So for MA, you have to prepare. So you can, what I would suggest is you can start with your syllabus. You clear your MA 1 and 2 syllabus, whatever texts are there. So that portion from the history of English literature is done. You have completed, and your MA preparation is also done. I would not suggest you to do separate preparation for NET before you clear your MA, because make sure that you have to clear your MA with 55 percentage or above. If it is less than this, you will not be qualified for NET or SLET. So your first step should be clear your MA at least with 55 plus percentage, right? So that's step one. Second, now you already know, like I tried to tell you, that from where you have to start. You have to start from 10th century, because from there English started becoming a language, right? So if you think of 10th century and right now it is 21st century, so what's the period? It is almost 1000 years. It's a huge body of it, and it is tiring, it is demanding, but which I did, and I think you can also think of, is think of a group, maybe some of your classmates, if you are interested, all of you can group together and you can divide the ages, that okay, I'll take care of first, say three century, from 10th, 15th, or 14th, and your other friend would start from 14th, 15th, and 16th, right? So there, as I said, you have to have the layers, that okay, first of all, I study the history. It means pure history, not literature history. Pure history. Who was the king? What was happening in England? So that's the pure history. So that's one. Second would be social history, right? And third would be history of literature. So when I say history of literature, means who were the authors, what were the works, right? And why do you think novels were written more in 17th century and poet dramas were written more in 16th century? Shakespeare and Ben Jonson, all of them were dramatists, right? So why drama was flourishing in 16th century and the novels were flourishing? So then you get to know the history. The first newspaper came into existence in the 17th century with Restoration. So prose, that means not the poetry, the prose part developed in 17th century. So those logics you will be able to understand. Uh, I know there are no shortcuts, but this is how you can go age-wise. So it will be easier for you to remember. Memory does not work in silo. It will always work in context. For example, if I remember, okay, Parul Shukla, so then I have to associate you with, okay, Gurukul student, MA student. This is how I'll remember your name and your face and all those things. Similarly, if I say Shakespeare, as you like it, you know, so that way I'll be able to remember. And then I'll also need to find the connection, right? Say for example, the later works will have some influence of the previous works. So for example, Shakespeare is a great influencer. So you'll find that many of the later on works, uh, there was Aldous Huxley, a novelist in 19th century. He wrote a novel called A Brave New World. That's the name of a novel, which is the title of this novel is derived from Shakespeare's one of the character called Miranda in Tempest. She was she grew up in an island and she never seen the world outside. And it is for the first time that she looked at a man, right? And then she said, "Brave new world. I never knew this world is so big and so beautiful." Now, this brave new world is a phrase used by Shakespeare in one of the plays in 16th century. In 19th century, there is a novelist who used that dialogue and prepared a novel, a separate novel on it. So you could see the connection dot. So that will take place. So I'm sorry I don't have shortcut because there are no shortcuts. But you'll have to go through the history at least once, and if possible, two resources you should have. Let's say one history book here, one other history book here, and that you can do. Or maybe one NPTEL course you do. There is video lecture series available. So that video lecture series